to the cloud, share the screen, ta-da. And then let me hide these eight controls and hide this. Okay, I want to show everybody this new flex. And what we're going to do is that thing we were just playing around with, where the aside and the max width. We're going to change that. We're going to do that the proper way with flex. I wanted to show you all this on Friday, but we had learned enough and we had spent enough time in Flexbox where I thought we would have gotten lost. So here's what I'm going to show you is if we go over to this complete guide of Flexbox, which I'm referencing, and I think I sent everybody a link to. We talked about how the stuff on the left is the properties for the parent. Those are the ones we spend most of the time on, right? So that's justify content, align items, flex direction, everything that's like the first 13 Flexbox properties, right? So I want to show everyone the most useful property for children. As we talked about, a lot of these children rules are just so specific and granular that you don't need to memorize them or use them. Like order, I've never adjusted to order, but I have once. It's probably for class. So here's what I'm going to show you is we're going to learn a shorthand rule, and it's going to be a combination of flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. So what is that? Well, the rule is this, flex. So let's talk about what's going to happen. Welcome to notes. All right. I'm going to call this rule the flex rule. So the flex rule is a combination of three rules. It's flex, grow, flex, shrink, and flex basis. And so you write it as a collection of those three things. I'm going to show you an example of a flex rule. Let me just try to make this a little larger. So it would be, this would be in CSS, I would say like flex 0, 1, 320 pixels. So what in the world does that? Well, this first number is, I always get these mixed up. Let me check. Flex grow. So this is grow, and then shrink, and then basis. Now, what am I talking about? We haven't even learned what these things are. Have you noticed that, you know, when we create these flex layouts, our buttons, for example, whatever it is we've laid out in flex, they can stretch and get a little wider and a little thinner, right? So like if we were to go to our nav bar, maybe not the nav bar, but certainly on the full page layout, like, you know, the main gets wider or thinner and the content adjusts just fine. So it has the ability to shrink and grow. Remember, this thing is called Flexbox. So the whole idea here is flexibility. So if we wanted to, and we don't, we could say, I want to give this element, this flex element, a flex grow of 0. What that means is don't grow. You will never get bigger than your normal size. If I gave a flex element, this is for the children, remember, so not for the parents. So we would apply this to like the list items, for instance, and not the unordered list. If I give something the value of flex grow 1, that means it's going to have the ability to get bigger than smaller. Whatever its starting size is, let's see, it has the ability to widen automatic. That's pretty good, right? Okay, similarly, flex shrink, we're going to either have a 0 or a 1 for the value. There are other values that we can plug in there, but we're not going to. They're pretty rare. So what does that mean? If flex shrink is set to 0, that means this thing cannot get smaller than it already is. If flex, so that would be 0, it can't change. If flex shrink is 1, it does have the ability to shrink. So let me say that another way. If we told something that its flex grow value is 1 and its flex shrink value is 1, it's going to be totally flexible, right? It'll get big, it'll get small. Whatever available space there is, it will expand to it. As your screen gets smaller and smaller, like when we're resizing a code pen window, it will shrink. So that's totally flexible. That sounds good. You can see how you'd want a limit on it, though. In other words, if we had, like, if we just draw up here, we have a horizontal nav and it has buttons that are like this going across. At a certain point, the buttons are going to get too wide, where it just looks stupid, right? Where like they're stretching out so much, it's like, boom, and there's like 90 miles of button. So what we probably want is like a cap on that, right? Like don't get any bigger than this or that. Similarly, things could get so small that they're like cutting off like the words of the text. So what we really need is what's called a flex basis, and that's our third number, which means, okay, if you are not shrinking or growing, this is the size that you're going to be. So if we look at this rule that I wrote as an example here, what this says is you cannot grow. You are allowed to shrink. And if you are neither shrinking or growing, your size is going to be 320 pixels. In this case, this will probably be a width if we're talking about that now. It depends on if we're, vertical or horizontal. This is a confusing rule for a few reasons. First of all, these are three separate CSS rules. We could write them all separate. But what everybody does is write them as one big thing because they're all dependent on each other. In other words, if you're going to set a flex grow and a flex shrink value, you need a flex basis, or else it doesn't know what it's shrinking or growing from. The default value is auto, and that doesn't really mean anything. That really means it's as big as its content, right? So if I had a button for home, and it has those 4 characters in it, HOME, that's going to be a different width. That's going to be skinnier than portfolio, which has a lot more letters, right? I don't want to confuse it too much, but as usual, when these things are confusing, when I'm talking about them in theory, if we see them in CodePen, I think it will make a little bit more sense. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over to the thing we were working on Friday, full page layout. Let me point out, before I do this new rule, I'm going to fork this because this is the version we did Friday. I'm going to fork this and say, change the name to full page layout with new flex pool. Now, again, I name these really explicitly so y'all can find it in my CodePen. I don't care what you do on yours. So what I'm going to do is remove 2 lines of code, and then we'll replace it with some new flex tools. The rule I'm going to get rid of is for our aside. So we have a rule somewhere in here that says, geez, where is it? Oh, we wrote a lot of code yesterday. Max width 180 pixels. I'm going to turn that off. So as a reminder, we added that rule because the aside was quite wide. It was taking up about 35 or 40% of our page. It didn't seem like we decided that either. It was just kind of like the computer was like, no, that's how big it is. So that's a little bit weird. We wrote this rule in the media query as well, right? In the media query, I think it says, yeah, max width 100%. I'm just going to turn that off too for consistency's sake. I actually don't think we use it. Okay, I turned that off because I want to replace that with a flex rule. So it's going to say flex, and we're going to have 3 values here. So just to remind you, it's going to be grow, shrink, and then basis. Let me comment that out. So grow, do I want this aside to be able to grow? No, I don't. What I'm going to do is set a basis for it for a width, and I don't want it to get bigger than that. That's kind of what's happening here. So I'm going to start with a 0. Do I want this aside to be able to get smaller? In other words, as we shrink this, see it's shrinking in size before the media query, it's getting thinner. I do. That seems like a good idea. So I would say 1. And then lastly, how big do I want this thing to be when nothing's happening? Well, it would be the same as what we had up here, right? It's the same value, but instead of saying max width, we're going to set the flex basis to 180 pixels. That looks a lot thinner than what we did with max width. I wonder if it's because we said that it could shrink, and it's shrinking. Does that make sense, everybody? The second rule, the second number here says shrink. If we change that to 0, let's see what happens. Now it's set to 180 pixels. It's not going to get any thinner than 180 pixels. I don't prefer that, actually. What about grow? What if we set the first one to grow? Let's see what happens. Absolutely nothing happens. Okay, I'm kind of surprised by that. I thought it would stretch out a little bit. But it's not. Okay. Again, if we said 180 pixels, it can shrink, and it seems very intent on shrinking. It gets right down to 180 pixels really quickly. Bless you. So here's again what I would say. I would probably say like, don't grow Actually, I would say you can grow, but don't shrink beyond 180 pixels. I actually think that number is a little low now. Like maybe 220 would look a little better. But whatever, again, I'm not gonna be measuring things. I just thought it felt a little skinny there. So here's an example of our new rule. And it says, all right, this aside, this flex element, it can get bigger, it can not get smaller, and this is how big I want its basis to be. I'm going to do another example of this just because it's important, I think. But let's see what happens when we resize, right? When we get down to mobile. Let's see what the aside did with these two bullets. That's correct, by the way. We turned the float off, so that's intentional. We should center that image, but anyways. That got you. Yeah, this is the aside, right? All this stuff down here. So it looks fine. To put that another way, when we put a max width on our aside here, we had to go overwrite that in our media query and say, no, forget that. When we replace that with this new flex rule, we didn't have to add anything to the media query. It just figured it out on its own. I think the reason is, we're saying you're supposed to be 220 pixels wide, and it is. But we gave it the ability to grow. And it doesn't grow until we go here, because suddenly it has a lot more horizontal room because it's stacking rather than side by side. So that's why that rule is working. Let me say it that way. And that I'm not positive you'll need to use that for this final project, but I think it's really necessary to know if you're going to claim that you have taught someone Flexbox or you have learned Flexbox. So as a reminder, if we go back to this kind of like cheat sheet here, Chris Coyer describes what flex grow is, flex shrink, and flex spaces. And again, he was very good with words. This is worth reading through just to kind of make it click better in your mind. And then he summarizes this flex rule. Now I gotta say, this code's a little confusing. He's trying to show kind of like a generic version of it, right? But it looks like some weird math problem. But anyways, that's how everybody uses this flex shrink, flex grow, and flex basis, is they just write this one rule with those three values. It's like a shortcut that everybody uses almost, because again, you can write them separately, but none of them really work without each other. You need all three rules. So that's why we write it. Again, I don't think that's necessary for this project, but I haven't thought through the project in a year, so maybe I'll look at it and be like, oh, we need flex basis. You'll notice that that's the last rule for the children. And then you just have a ton of blank space because there's a lot more rules for the parent. So remember, you can reference this page when you're working on your project. That's totally fine. You can also just like copy and paste from what we did before. That's totally fine. That is a new rule though, and I know it's a little strange and confusing. So if it's giving you a hard time, let me know. We can go over it a little bit more. Y'all feeling comfortable with what we're doing so far? Okay, I'm just, I'm checking in because I know it's like 9:30 on a Monday morning, but not too many questions, and this is going to be due tomorrow, so I just want to make sure everyone feels comfortable. Okay, well, in that case, I think we should try to make a new code pen, and I'm going to try to recreate Elon's footer, the footer at the bottom of every Elon page. I'm going to lay it out with Flex. The reason I wanted to do this is everything we've laid out with Flex so far has been a nav bar or a full page. And that's great. Those are the two most useful things for y'all. But I want to make something else that's not that. Because when you're making something else, it requires you to think through and remember what all the Flex rules do. Originally, I was thinking we could make a card, but I think this nav bar will be more fun. Let me show you what I mean by card. Search code pen. Well, I kind of want to search my stuff. Let's see. Public. I forgot how to search my own stuff. Your work. Okay, and then I'm going to search. Oh, no, I forgot. Card. I think I showed you all like I had oh, this is card. This is not what I expected. Find title slider. No. There was a final project start point. That's kind of useful. Okay, this isn't working at all. Let me go to the work again and get rid of this. I think, okay, where am I? Didn't I show you all that like Pokemon card? It's somewhere in here. Did lose you all. Or it's Pikachu, that's what it is. Originally I was thinking, hey, why don't we make a card like this? Because it'll get everyone to practice like colors and fonts and spacing and stuff. And I think that would be a good idea. So I wanted to point this out because I think making the footer will be more useful to us in a class environment. This was kind of fun to me. If y'all wanted to like practice, I don't know why you practice if I'm going to be assigning this in like an hour, but making a card is kind of a useful way of practicing. Like, how do I get all these aligned? No, exactly the same. These exactly the same. Everything looks centered, nothing broken. Anyways, nothing fancy here in terms of our CSS or anything. And this is not responsive. This is so skinny. Okay, so let's try making that footer. I'm going to go to the start of CodePen and create a new pen. I created from that template. Although I don't think that's necessary for making the footer. I do think everyone wants to make sure for the final project you have these rules in your CSS. So I'll make sure everybody's working in CodePen with those rules. So we are making, let's see, this. I'm going to pull this page out, go to the bottom, squish this in so we can see it a little better. And let's talk about how we would lay out this footer. Let me point out, I'm not talking about the social bar above or the also of interest, just the stuff in here. So what can we say about how would we lay this out? What's like the primary, we're going to use flex, but like what's it going to look like? To me, it looks like 3 horizontal boxes. The one in the middle is twice as wide as the other 2. So that's going to give me an opportunity to show you another flex tool that's not super important, but it seems to know. And then if we look at these individual boxes, what we can say? Well, this is just a list of links and it's vertically stacked and text aligned to the right. I don't even think we need to use flex to lay that out. We could, but I don't think we need it. It's just a list of links. We can do that with an unordered list. That's probably how I do that. With a lot of CSS, so there's no buttons or dots, it's white, whatever. We can almost certainly duplicate that for over here and just text the line left. So those seem pretty easy to me. This is also just stacked for the most part, right? Like that's an image, by the way, so we'll just be able to steal that. Text, all the text is text centered. That's all written as one line. It seems pretty straightforward. In the past, when I've had students do this project and they have to duplicate an existing page on Elon's website, I usually told them they don't have to do the footer because it would just really beat students up. Again, we're looking at it now and talking about like, oh, this doesn't seem so bad, but we used to do boot camp with 3 days of instruction, and the 4th day you're building this page. And it was a real challenge. That's very different from us. We've gone Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, today. And we have some extra kind of like, we don't feel pressure, and I don't feel rushed at all compared to normally. Okay, so let's try making this thing. First of all, I don't know what color that is. That like kind of slate gray that they have going on. I also don't know where, there it is. Okay, here's my code. It's over here. Let me start by trying to imitate that color. So let's say like background, I was in the body in HTML here. Let me do hashtag, let's see, like 333. That's pretty close. That's definitely close enough. As a reminder, if you enter the same number 3 times or 6 times, you're going to get a gray for hexadecimal. The equivalent of that in RGB would just be the same, enter the same number for the R, the G, and the B. I'm just going to leave this as it is. It looks fine. What we want to do in our HTML, I would think, is create that structure we talked about. So there will be a parent element that's holding 3 sections, I guess. There are a million different ways that we could code this. I'm going to try to do it similar to the way we did it on Friday. So I'm going to have a div as a parent element and then 3 sections. You know what? Why am I doing div? This is a footer. I'm sorry. Let's do footer. That's going to be so much clearer. And close it with footer. Apologies for saying div. And then inside that, I'm going to create 3 sections. You can copy and paste all those things. I can save some time. I don't want to type all those things out. There's like 16 links down there. Let's see what happens if we. That looks promising. I'm gonna go into this first section and see what happens if I paste this text. That worked really well. Okay, I'm kind of surprised by that. So I think everybody saw what I did. If you go to any page on elon.edu, go to the bottom. I just highlighted these 8 and did Command C and then Command V and pasted it in. Obviously, we got to add some code to this. We don't want to leave any text float around. But as I mentioned earlier, I think we should view this as an unordered list. These will all be list items. So if those words make sense to you, go ahead and code it out. Let's see. I'm going to employ copy and paste and just paste this opening list item tag and do the same thing. Or the closing tag. Okay, let me go ahead and add some rules to this that seem pretty obvious here. I'm going to make a rule for all list items. I just say list dash style none because we don't want any bullets in there. Adding to that rule for the LI, I'm also going to say color white. Actually, it looks kind of like a gray. It looks like a light gray. Let's see. That's a little better. Is that right? That's close enough. Okay, color AAA. I would also say it's a font family sans serif. You're going to get more picky than that. That looks pretty good. Last thing I would say, just in terms of size, I think we want to reduce the font size. I don't know what it is, but I'm guessing it's defaulting at 16. So let's see if it's 14. That looks pretty good. Last thing I'm going to do is they're a little bit more spaced out. The buttons are, or I'm sorry, links on Elon's page than ours are. I can think of a couple of ways that we could fix that. I'm wondering if we could do it with line height, like we did on Friday. It's going to add a huge number to see. Yeah, that went pretty well. Slightly too large. Let me go down a little bit. Somewhere around there. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Again, we don't have to be super big. The last thing I see is it appears to be text dash align right. Okay, so that looks fine now because we haven't written any flex rules to kind of control our layout. So realistically, our page is going to look really stupid until we plug all this stuff in. That's kind of common for web design. You get your content in first, even if it's not your actual content, it's just lorem ipsum. And then you can write some of these layout rules. The important thing is we've created the structure in our HTML where everything's going to go. So it should all add up. I think we should jump over to this third one. And let's do this box because we just did the first one, and we can probably use all the same rules, and then I think we're gonna have to change one thing. So I'm gonna go over here and try to copy all this. I'm gonna collapse this first section, go to the last, and paste them in, and yeah, do the same thing. So unordered list and then a bunch of list items. That's what it looks like. Okay. So let's see. We have, I'm going to collapse my HTML so we can kind of see our structure here. Looks like we've got section with the UL, get rid of that space. Kind of like an empty section, that's the middle one. That's where like the map goes, just right back there. And then another unordered list inside section. So what I think we should be able to do is, the footer holds these three sections. So these are the three direct descendant children. We should be able to add a rule for footer that says display flex, and these will show up horizontal. Let's give that a shot. I'm going to put that here. I'm going to put that above the LI. Again, it doesn't really matter what order we do. It's more for us. Here, so let's do footer. But I feel, since footer is the parent, I'm going to put it first. So display flex. There we go. No, I know it still looks wrong, but we'll get it looking right. I think once we fill in the middle, it'll look a little bit better. I'm noticing that the text that we just created for the right-hand side of the footer is also right justified, right? And we don't want that. We want it to be left justified. Right, this one's to the left, this one's to the right. So that's going to require that we use ID or class in here, right? Because we've got text align right. I'm going to turn this rule off. This is for all list items. That's not what we want, right? So what we need to do is get more specific. I'm going to go into this first section and say ID equals first, because I just called it first. I'm going to go into the third section, right? That's where our last bit of links are, and call it, let's see, ID equals third. By the way, there are multiple ways of solving this problem as well. We could have kept this rule for the list item and then only overwritten it for third or something, but I'm trying to make my code as clear as possible, so there's no kind of tricks in it. So when you look at it, it makes more sense. Okay, so what do we have to fix now? Well, we can leave all these rules for LI. That applies to both lists, right? That's totally fine. But the specificity has to come with that text align. So I'm going to write hashtag first. Remember, hashtag to reference the ID. And this is text dash align right. So we should see this guy jump over. There we go. And let's do the same thing for third. Third, text align left. Okay, there we go. Doing okay so far? I was out Saturday night and there was this huge rainstorm coming. And we would go to did you see that on the radar? It was like, oh my God. Like I didn't even think it was gonna rain. And my phone went off and it was the Elon alert. It was like hail and stuff. What? So I was in Chapel Hill. We're looking at the radar and it's just a wall headed right towards us. It's like, all right, we need to get to where we're going or go home. It never came. The rain, I don't know what, it just like dissipated, must have gone to Mevin or something. Never came. So weird. Like the sky it got all windy and I'm sure like dogs were acting weird. It just never landed. It was so weird. I wish it had.
My electricity was going in and out.
It was?
Yes. And I was freaked out in a house by myself and I was like, well, this happens.
Were you around here?
Yeah, I was in the house and the electricity was going in and out. I was like,
so y'all got it really bad.
Yeah, this was the sky. I took a picture of it and like, that's insane.
That is insane.
Right.
Yeah. That's so foreboding. Yeah.
I can't get mine to text line.
All right, let's fix it. You coded it. That's my mind. That's not my mind. So can I look at your nation? Oh, yep, yep. So, yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot in stuff that we do in class. So I'll turn off rules. Hopefully that won't happen when we can do the final project. Let's see. map, we gotta do the map. Let's look at this middle section, so it's got that's just an image, again, you should be able to get the image address for that. And then some text, this all looks, what do you call it? Text align setup. So this isn't causing too much trouble. I did want to remind everybody, we are gonna have to write a media query for it as well, but so if we go really small, what does the footer do? Well, that's pretty complicated, right? There's first, there's third, and second comes down here. How in the world are we gonna do that? Well, I wouldn't do it this way. I would have them stacked. So first, second, and third on top of each other. And so that's how I want to approach this. In fact, that might be what happens if we were able to get this any smaller. I can't make Chrome smaller. But before we get to that, let's worry about this center part. So like I mentioned, we should be able to just grab this image. Let me control click, copy image address. All right. Here is our third, or I'm sorry, our middle section. So I'm going to say image source equals, I do not consider this a figure. I consider it an image. Note that it is an SVG. Well, that was weird. It showed up and then it disappeared. Anybody else see it? I saw it. I swear it was there. See, it went like, it was like a little one and then it disappeared. I think we're gonna have to give it a size or else it's just gonna disappear. But again, I want to get all of our content in here first, so I'll worry about that in a second. We have a few more lines of text. And yeah, there it is. In the footer. So let's see. I'm hoping we can just highlight all this. Yep, and copy it. I'm again going to do this as an unordered list. Again, not the only way to do it. In fact, we could probably do this just with like p tags or something, but I'm just going to try to make it so this is as consistent as possible. Right? It'll still listen to the same LI rules, for instance. So anyways, I'm going to hit paste on that text. There's the text. And let me just UL and LI and all that kind of fun stuff. And I guess we'll see if this was the best approach. My hope is the list items are, the little dots are already gone because we have all these rules for LI. The color is going to be correct. It seems like it's like halfway there. So if we just use the same codes we have, so yeah, definitely. That worked great. Anyone run into any problems? Okay, cool. Let me hit save. I want to center all this stuff, I guess. I guess we're gonna have to create another ID, right? Because we have yet another unordered list that we have to write specific rules for. Well, that's pretty straightforward because we named those things first and third. So I'm gonna give our second section the ID giraffe. No, I'm just kidding. Second. And then we can go down here and, well, I guess I'll put second right there. So that's just going to be text align center. Right? All right. It's a pretty nice looking footer so far. Does anyone remember the magic CSS rule for centering a block element? That's okay. I'm going to remind you of it. I'm going to take the footer and say margin 0 auto and hope that that kicks it to the center of the page. It did not. It didn't move. Well, I've mentioned this before, but centering can be surprisingly difficult in web design. When we added this rule Friday, it was to a different thing, but it worked just fine. This didn't do anything, looks like, right? What if we added it to like the body tag? Let's see. Margin 0 auto. Nothing. So the magic centering rule doesn't seem to be doing anything. Let me turn this off. And let me turn this off. Yeah.
My centering for the
Oh, for the middle.
information underneath the map.
Oh, we got to find the map too. Oh, you have the map.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's so funny. My map disappeared and then came back. That's the line. That was right. Yeah. Second. Yeah, better one. The second row, yeah, looks like that's actually. Can you show me that HTML just above second? Oh, yeah, you want that. Well, that's probably what it is, because that's what we're trying to center. No? They're going back up above it, so now the other image. Now that closes. So you have second image UL. That really looks right. Can you collapse the UL to have a little arrow next to it? Okay. Can you do me a favor and show me the CSS for above second? I don't see anything wrong. Do you want to try saving?
Yeah,
To see if it like wakes up?
right, so.
Yeah, I think you save it refreshes, but I always do that.
Mhm.
So in second, what are those list items where you have like 100 campus drive and all that stuff? Yeah, so there's your UL, 100 campus drive, open, close, open, close. That's totally right. I wonder if we have a conflicting rules. Can you scroll down to your LI? So that's it.
Oh.
Right, so that's like the universal rule that we wrote before we wrote the IDs and classes. So I would delete that, and then I bet it's gonna work. I don't want to stick away. Yeah, okay. All right, that's the second time that happened. So hey, let me mention this to everybody. Y'all remember we had a rule that we had to get rid of. It was on the list items, and it said, I think we said text align, right? And then we realized, oh, we had to do that with IDs for all the different ones. Well, a couple of you left this rule on unintentionally, and that's what was causing our problem. So that's a pretty common, I don't know if I'd call it an error, but it's almost like overcoding, right? We added too many rules. They conflict. We created a conflict. I'm just bringing that up because that's a lot harder to find than a typo, right? Because all your code is correct. You've written nothing wrong. It's just you created conflicts. So that's kind of tricky. Speaking of which, I still haven't been able to center this thing. But let's take a look at, I want to look at where it is. Like, what is the footer? What does it think it is? So I'm going to put a border on it. That's my solution to everything. A big red border. It ignored the red. There we go. Okay, so there is my footer. I was writing rules for the footer to center, right? Why didn't it center? Because it's filling the whole darn screen. It can't center. How do you center something that's entirely the full width? So that's why margin zero auto didn't do anything in either place. I'm asking it to center something that's taking up the entire width of the screen. If, by the way, I'd set like a max width on the footer and then say margin zero auto, that would have worked. So what's wrong here? What's wrong is that everything inside the footer is centered, right? Or I'm sorry, is left justified. So we want to spread these things out. That is a flex rule, right? The footer is our flex container, display flex. So how are we going to spread these things out? We should be able to say justified content, space between. That's pretty good. I want to compare that to the original. Let's see, is it space between? What happens when we get really big? No, it's like more like centered. Well, let's see how that looks with center. I'm worried it'll cram them together. Oh, thank you. That's not too bad. I would think that we could go to the middle one and create some padding or something. But I just want to check if space around spaces amount better. That's pretty good. Yeah, let's see. That's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So we could get really granular, right? And say, no, center them, and I want to add some padding here. But I'm happy with this. That is, if I asked them to do this as a project and this is what you're handed in, I would not do a hard job. Let me turn off my border because that looks kind of weird. What else do we need to do to this nav? I can't even get down there anymore. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, well, first of all, if we hover over the links, they become underlined. Not a normal underline, it's like a dotted underline. So that could be kind of complicated. We can take a look at that. What else? There are these little kind of like borders, right? Separating them. So let's try doing those. I'm gonna start with the borders, because this is kind of like what we were talking about with justify content space around. When we add these borders, I think we're gonna see how well justify content space around is doing. We might have to go back to center and do that padding thing we were talking about. But so the way I would add these, what do you call it? These like borders, I'm just gonna add them to second. We'll put one on the left and one on the right and see how that looks. You know, the alternative would be to add a border to the right-hand side of first. That would work too. They're really not that different. That is, in terms of, they would be right next to each other. I would think. Well, let's see. Okay, so we have rules for second. So let me try border left. So just a line on the left, and I'll say 2 pixels solid red. I just want to see it and deal with the color later. All right, that's really close to the map, right? So if we look here, it's way too close. That might work better on first. Oh, yeah, it's that border right. Oh, that's really far away. Okay, I was expecting this to be much closer. So this is the space between, I guess, or space around. So that tells me that should shrink and grow. Yeah. So that's that little space there. Let's see, which of these do we want? This line looks a lot closer to this text than it does to the map. So I'm going to put it there just so we don't create a huge amount of padding. So let's see what I would say for that. How do we push a border? That's going to be a padding. Right, if we did margin, it would push this text away, but it would push the border away. So I'm going to say padding right. Gosh, I don't know, 16 pixels. Okay. Definitely needs to be more. I'll try 32. Okay, that looks good to me. So I'm going to turn off this other one that was broken. I'm going to try to replicate what we just did with first and third and just reverse things, and then we'll find the color. Left, padding left, I think. Yeah, that's not too bad. Again, I'm not going to be super picky. I don't know what color that is. I'm going to set it to, yeah, the same thing as the text. So that looks okay. So I'm just changing it to solid AAA, the same color we made the text. There you go, pretty nice footer. I can only think of one other rule that we've discussed, and that would be, I guess I'd call this li hover. Let's see if this works. Border, bottom, 1 pixel, solid red. Again, just want to see if it shows up. That's not bad, huh? Let's check it over here. You know, it's not perfect. It seems to me that their hover effect is on the text itself, rather than like I'm putting on a list item which holds the text. I don't want to get too picky though, so I'm okay with that. How would we match this? Well, first of all, it looks like the underline is again going to be that AAA color. And I think we can change solid to dotted. That was one of the weird border styles we saw here. That's pretty good. I mean, these weak a lot. Yeah.
I can't see the border that.
You need the word dash or solid. I think ours are solid. Yeah. Yeah, borders are weird in that they require those 3 parameters. There you go. There's one.
Yeah, this is what I thought this was.
You wrote the same thing. Border left. Border right. Third, then look, your color scheme looks wrong. Okay, you're missing a closing bracket, right? After or right before second.
Here?
Nope, right above that whole section. So like, I can't see their lines, but right under padding left, you put this on, that's good. Yeah, it's just not listening to what it's the written correctly. To kind of make sure it's up. Okay. Yeah, hey, no, okay, it's the space. Between the colon and the word cover. It's very sensitive. This is pretty nice looking. I'm like, keep singing our praises, but like, wow, that went well. I know we're not done. We got the responsiveness will be well different, but I'm not gonna, again, I'm not gonna try to imitate what we saw on their website. I just want everything to stack. So let's hit save and let's see what happens when we make it really small. Okay, so this is why we learned flex, right? This is a disaster. Can you imagine seeing this on a phone? It's like, oh, I remember something that I forgot. So let me show you this really quickly. This is getting picky, but this is I mean, a lot of you expressed an interest in UX and UI design. This is one of my biggest pet peeves is, can you tell that the text moves when I hover over it? It's getting pushed by that 1 pixel underline. As I move up and down, it looks like the dot is just moving, but if you look at the text below where I'm hovering, it's pushing it down. The reason is there was no border, and when we hover, suddenly there's a 1 pixel border, so everything's shifting by 1 pixel. It's not that big of a deal, but if we made it like 6 pixels, it's really odd because you can see the text itself move. You never want to move text that people are supposed to click on as a link. That sucks. So how do we fix that? This is my little hack. I would create a border bottom that's a 1 pixel. I don't care if it's dotted, it doesn't matter. Sure, dotted, and then set it the same color as our background, which I think is CCC. Might have made that up. Let's see. Whoa. Hang on a second. What was it? Background. 333. Okay, sorry. Now I've gotten lost. Border bottom on list items. Okay, so now what do we do? Well, first of all, let me point out, I have now 2 sections of rules for LI, so that's very sloppy, right? I got this whole section of rules for the list items, and then I was like, oh, I want to add a rule for the list items, and I made a new one. So that's not a good idea. I'm going to clean this up and just move these rules so they're all hanging out with each other. And let me do this. There we go. So my list item has a border bottom of 1 pixel, but it's the same color as the background, so you can't see it. And when you hover over it, we're just changing the color. That way, we're not adding a pixel, right? So it shouldn't move anymore. There, that's actually a pretty good illustration of what I was talking about. It did seem to space out our links a little bit more when we added that. So I'm going to reduce our line height a little bit. No, that's too much. Again, I'm being really picky. There we go. You save that. So that was that last thing that I realized I was going to forget. So I dialed back for that. But now we can get to the fun part. So we're going to write a media query. And in the media query, we're going to tell this thing to change its flex direction from the default, which is row, to column. And we can imitate what that's going to look like before we write the media query. I'm going to make this really small and then go to footer and just say flex. Again, we're going to replace this in a media query, but I just want to see if it works. Okay, this was flex direction column. Do these guys stack correctly? Yes, but we have some other issues, mainly the text align stuff. But it did stack. Those borders look weird now, so we'll have to change that, but pretty good. Okay, so again, that's not a rule that we want for our desktop CSS, but clearly it's going to work for our mobile CSS. So now I get to remind everybody what a media query looks like. First rule of a media query is it's at the very bottom of your CSS. And the reason is it is overwriting CSS rules that either you have already written or that are built into the tag. Okay, so it looks weird at media all and max dash width. We are doing a max width at 800 pixels, so I'm going to keep it at that for consistency's sake. But again, I'm just going to check it at 2 sizes, so don't worry about that. What do we want to do here? We want to tell the footer, this is what we just did, that its flex direction is column. That's our first step. Okay, Then what do we want with all these alignment issues? Let's see, like when this shrinks, I know this looks a little different when we do it, but I just want to see if they center the text or what they do. It looks like everything's centered. I do, they are still doing that to the right, to the left, and carry those things. I would just stack those and center them. So in our media query, I'm going to show you all something that's wrong, and then I'll show you how to do it correct. But this makes perfect sense. If we say, I want the unordered lists to text align, hey, maybe it will work. Oh, that actually did work. I did not think that that would work. The reason I did not think that would work is because we didn't write the text align rules for the UL. We wrote text align rules for first, second, and third. So we're not overwriting a rule, it seems, but it did work. The other thing I'm noticing is we don't need those orders anymore. So I'm thinking we can say that in the UL as well. Now I want, well, let's just say like order none. That didn't do anything. Okay, let me get rid of that rule because it didn't do anything. Let's find where we added the order. Let's see, order left. Oh, it's in. Okay, so I've got one in third and I've got one in first. Okay, so we have to write those explicitly. So let's see, hashtag first, hashtag third. We can say order none, I think. There they go. This looks pretty good, I think. We can also, in CodePen, you can do something like this, right? And make it like ridiculous. Nobody has a device that doesn't make any sense. So realistically, they'd be seeing it around this because everybody has, like, nobody's using a flip phone anymore. I don't know. They probably are, but we did not make these links. I'm okay with that. We know how to do that. It just requires some extra CSS afterwards to kind of clean things up, but I'm fine with it. I'm not going to go clicking on things here. I think that looks pretty good, y'all. Did anybody not make it to the finish line? Anything weird or broken on theirs? Again, we should be able to see it like this, and then like this. One thing it might benefit from is a max width, because we can get it, like it starts getting pretty darn spread out, right? I'm thinking we could probably just say that in the footer, which takes up a whole thing. So let's see, that's probably at the top of my CSS. That's the only thing I'm thinking of here that expand on this max width. I don't know, 1180 pixels. Let's just see what that looks like. I just want to see where it caps out. Yeah, that looks good. It's not going to get wider than that. I like that. Now that it has a max width, we could add that centering. What I mean is, since it's not filling the whole screen necessarily, if we're over 1180 pixels. So I'm going to say margin 0 auto, and we won't see that kick in unless we're really wide. Yeah. All right, so there's our footer. We get down to 800, it stacks. And that is, yeah, might have run into more problems there. I was really expecting that to derail us. I feel like I set it up like it's going to derail us too, like both footer has been everyone's both of them. Well, it's pretty straightforward. I thought that was a very good practice for really particular flex rules, and mainly because we're imitating something from that already exists, right? So that's essentially your assignment, is to imitate something that already exists. Where did it go? And that's going to make it a little bit easier. So what I mean is when we look at this page, let me just scroll down. Oh, interesting. The header never goes away. The header doesn't scroll. They have a dynamic header, I should point out. It's pretty ridiculously dynamic. So there's, you could say there's two headers, right? In a sense, kind of confusing, but it kind of looks that way. If we start scrolling, the second one shrinks a little bit, and then the first one scrolls away. So that's kind of interesting. As a reminder, everybody, I don't want to make that top one. We're just going to make this one. So like looking at this page, how do we make this? Well, that we can do that with a nav bar probably. What's going to be hard about it? There's one thing there, and that's justified to the left. Everything else is justified to the right. How are we going to do that? It's a little tricky, right? I want to show you how to do that really quickly, but basically, you remember these rules for the children. If I remember right, we can do something like this and say align self. And say so everybody's going to go to the left, but this one guy's going to go to the right, something like that. Let's see. I think that'll work. That's all the information we have. So let's see if we can do that. I'm just really quickly going to go to my work and go to pen. Excuse me. Create a new pen, and I'm just going to try to make this nav bar. Then we can take a break. And I'll go over to the side. But obviously this will be kind of helpful. Let's see, nav. Closing the nav. As usual, you can code with me, you can not, it's up to you. I'm gonna give this like an H2 tag, like today. That's probably an image, actually. Let's see. That is an image. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do is in our nav, I'm gonna create an unordered list. Actually, I wonder if we create a list. I'm talking out loud. Just thinking here. I'm wondering if we should put today and Elon in this list. I'm going to start by doing that. We might have to undo it, but what I mean by putting it in the list is making a list. So a list item with an image. Whoa, that's a really big image. By the way, the reason it looks really weird is the text is white and the background's white. So you just can't see it, but we will. So again, I don't know if the best approach here is going to be creating list items where the image is one of the list items, but I'm going to try that first because I'm going to try this flex rule with line self that I mentioned earlier. What are our other ones? Want ads, events, weekly newsletter. I'm going to write those out really quickly. I'm not going to worry about the appearance too much of this page. I'm going to change the background color so you can actually see that graphic. But I'm not going to worry too much about like font size and stuff like that. What's the last one? Archive. Okay, so that's all my HTML. I'm going to shrink this a little bit and add some CSS. So if I'm going fast, I'm just going to try to make it so you can see all my code. Let me shrink this down again. I hit save and then undid everything. All right, I don't hear anybody typing, so I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little bit more CSS. So even though we have a nav element, the UL has to be our parent element for flex. So UL, oops, display flex, we should get horizontal. Okay, still looks weird. Let's say list style none. Have y'all notice that we can add that move to a UL or to a list item? I'm going to say background maroon. Now I know that's not going to be quite exactly the right color. That doesn't matter. It's close enough. Background maroon. I'm going to say color white. Make the text white. And then font family. The thing I said I'm going to do. Sounds silly. All right. So how is this thing laid out? That looks really weird right now. That image is huge, right? Just crazy huge. How can we shrink that image? I'm going to say nav img. I'm just saying nav img rather than saying img because any page we make, it's going to have more images on it than just one. So this, just to remind you all, when we write it like that, that means only images in the nav. Let's say, how about a max width? Would that work? I don't know, 180 pixels. I just want to get it smaller. There, okay, this isn't going to be perfect, but that's a start. We might have to go back and delete that. But how is this laid out on the page? If I remember right, everything's right justified, right? Yep. So they have all this text pushed to the right. Oh, I forgot to submit views. So what that tells me is the UL, which is our flex parent. We'd say justify content, flex in. everything jumps all the way to the right. Now we gotta add some more movements here. Can we get today at Elon to jump all the way down? Well, how do we do that? I don't know if it's gonna work. I'm gonna start by adding an ID to the list item that contains that image. Oops, using my space. Here we go. So list item right where that image is. I'm going to say ID equals logo. How about? Okay. That's not going to change anything. What I'm hoping we can do now is go down. I'm just going to go right below our UL and say, let's see, ID hashtag logo, align self flex start. Did not do it. Let me check our complete guide to Flexbox. Let's see. There is align self. There it is. Align self. I said it. This allows default alignment on the one specified by align items to be overridden for individual flex items. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Did not seem to like it. Wrong thing. Let's see. Where am I? I'm lost. Here we go. So align self flex start should have been the opposite. Oh, no, that's right. No, that's wrong. Is it? Align self seems like it would be for like, we have justify content and then align items. It's almost like that's like the wrong tag. But I don't see it working. All right, so align self did not seem to work. So how are we gonna fix this? Well, here's what I'm thinking is, let's take this image out of this unordered list. In fact, right now it's a list item. I'm going to change it to a div. So now I've got div ID equals logo. And I'm just going to take it completely out of the unordered list and put it before. Well, it showed up top. Like here's our logo. Even though it's in the nav technically, it looks like it's sitting on top of the unordered list. So that's kind of not what we wanted. What if it wasn't in a div? What if it was just an image? In case it's not clear, I'm just kind of throwing stuff at the screen to see what's going to work. I was wondering if that wasn't an image, if it would show up in here. It doesn't look like it is. Let me save because I haven't saved it yet and refresh it. So what's the problem we're having here? We're trying to get this content on the same kind of horizontal line as our other stuff. But if it's inside our unordered list, then it's going to try to write justify, and we don't want that. Let me do something really quickly because it's driving me nuts. On the nav, I'm going to say background maroon. I think we only had it on the UL. There. So now we can kind of get a sense of, okay, that looks a little bit more normal. We just need to fix that image, which is stuck all the way, like, this is like taller than it needs to be, right? This whole kind of like section. So what's going on? All right, again, here's what my code looks like in the HTML, and I know I was messing around with it a lot. What would happen if I turn this div back on? Yeah, let me change that. Okay, that didn't seem to change anything. That's good. I don't want to try to move this image around on its own. I want it in some sort of box that I can manipulate. So we should be able to write CSS for logo and get it to do what we want. I don't think we're gonna have to do too much though, but let's see. What is logo? What's it do? Let me go down here and say hashtag logo and put a border around it. Like how tall is it? Is it as tall as the whole nav? No. Can you see that when we put a border on this, we can see that these two things are stacking. This is my div, and it's on top of my unordered list. Well, that's not what I wanted, right? I wanted these things to be side by side. So that's not quite working. Now, again, I know we could put it in the unordered list, and it would all be in one line, but we saw that that's going to cause other problems. So how can we fix this? I'm wondering, what if we said display inline block? You all remember we learned that rule with our first nav. And you can see that the border around logo now only surrounds itself, right? So what's wrong? Why isn't it working? Well, the problem is if we, I'm going to turn this rule off in a second, but if we put a similar border rule on our UL, you'll see that it's also occupying the entire width of the screen, right? All these things want to be block level elements. So if we want to change that, we have to tell it explicitly not to. So I'm going to say display inline block. To put that another way, more generally, if we have two elements, that's not what we wanted. Why did that happen? I can tell you. We had UL display flex. Looked great. And now we just wrote UL display inline block. We overrode our flex. So that's not going to work. I got to turn that off. How are we going to fix this though? What is going on here? How can we get these things on the same line? I still feel like having, this logo inside the list item is going to be the way to go. So all this stuff we did to cut it out and move it around, I'm going to try to move it back in. I'm going to change it from a div to a UL. Not a UL, a list item, sorry. And it's just totally in the wrong spot. So again, we tried, what was it? ID equals logo. Let me turn this off. That was inline block. So for logo, again, we tried align, self, let's just try like center or something. And it didn't move, right? It couldn't scoot around. If you look at our UL, it goes the entire width of the screen, right? It is really filling the whole screen. So I have an idea of how we can fix this, but it's kind of what I would call a hack. But first, I really wanted to prove to everyone that it's not a very straightforward thing to fix. And the flex rule that's in our documentation, if we want to call it that, doesn't really seem to apply. Also, a common error would be that our UL just starts here. And it's like, I'm doing everything you want. But we know that the UL starts here. So we put a border around it. You can see that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to say it in words first. I'm going to create an empty list item. I'm going to put it between the logo and all the other text. And then I'm going to make it really big. So here's what I need. I'm going to go in here and just do LI and then close LI. And it should create a list item in there. And we can't really see anything because it's just like, there's nothing there. Let's give this some sort of ID. So I'm going to say, or I'll do class. Class equals spacer. I'm going to call this a spacer because I'm going to use it to push our content around a little bit. Let me just see if we can get it to work, and then we can do this kind of correctly. Yeah. Question?
Mine is just like, what's nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been trying to figure it out.
Okay, well, let me just leave this code and we're going to change this. But can you see when I went to spacer and I gave it a width, it's pushing those things away from each other. We don't want to set it to a pixel width, but we'll play around with that. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, that's how I have it set up. So you have two closing UL. No. You have a closing UL tab. There's your opening UL. I think you can get rid of those two. Yep. And I think you need a closing LI text /LI.
I think that is
That's the image, I think, right? Yeah, so you just need it. Okay, there. I wonder why you're.
Yeah, it was like that.
Okay.
It wouldn't go into
Here, scroll down here because it should be. UL, no, that's right. Justify. You just misspelled justify. That's all it is. Get an extra I in there. Let's just make sure it jumps over. Okay, cool. Okay, so just to catch everybody up, we threw like a little invisible div right here, and I gave it a width. And that seems like it's going to work. Now, I'm not going to leave it at a width of 100 pixels or whatever. What we want to do is just kind of spread all this content out. So before I actually set a value for that, let's see what we can do with the flex rules we already have, right? Like right now, this says justify content flex end. Should we change that? Probably not, right? If we did center, it's gonna space all these out. We're gonna undo everything that we wanted, but look how crammed all this stuff is, right? It's all just jammed together, all these buttons. So here's how we would have done this on Friday. We would have gone into each of these buttons and been like, let's give them padding, right? Just like when we made like nav bars, give them padding, give them margin, space them out. I'm going to show you the way we want to do that in Flex, which is different, which is using one of those Flex child rules. So let's see, do we have things? No. Here's stuff for the LI. So I'm going to say Flex, let's say 1, 0, 120 pixels. That looks really different, right? But we're going to change these values, but what does that mean? That means it can grow, and it has definitely grown. It cannot shrink. And by default, I want each of the buttons, if they're not shrinking or growing, to be 120 pixels wide. So that looks wrong. What about if it can't grow? That's a little better. So you can't grow, you can't shrink. Let's see if you can shrink. That's going to cram them all together again, right? No, actually, that looks okay. Let's see what happens when we. Yeah, I kind of like that. So Flex 0, 1, 120 pixels seems like a large number. I mean, again, I'm just going to look at theirs. They don't have that much space between them, so let me bring that down. It's not too bad. I don't like that weekly newsletter is on 2 lines. It's kind of annoying. I'm wondering if this was like super wide, would it fix nothing? Yeah, it would, but that's wider than we want, I said. Let me go back down to 90. Then it looks pretty good. I wonder if we can add some specific rules in. So here's what I need. Here's our spacer, right? It has a width. I'm going to turn that width off and instead say flex. I want this to grow. I don't want it to shrink. And I think its basis should be pretty big. Like 320 pixels. Let's see how that works. That looks pretty good, right? Let's see. Yep, I mean, we need a media query, but can everybody see how it's keeping today at Elon to the left? No matter how wide we go. And everything's shrinking. Now, I know it's not perfect. I want to tweak those list items, change their font size and stuff, but it's not the end of the world. It's not so bad. Let me hit save. Now, if I have ever lost anybody in here while writing code, I would have lost them just then because I was moving all over the place and turning rules off in 2 different languages. We would all do something together and then I would undo it, right? We moved that whole div thing out and back in. So apologies if yours ended up being different from mine, but I was trying to illustrate how we would debug a problem like that. That's exactly the type of problem you're going to run into with this project. I also want to point out that's not the only way to fix it. I tried to do it based on only stuff that we've learned in here and gone over a bunch. But the solution would not be to find some new way to do it. Like, again, y'all are welcome to Google whatever you want, but if you find some code we have not learned in here, I probably wouldn't use that in Bootcamp. That's not going to be a good result. I'm going to turn that border off because it bugs me. And again, I think that 90 is probably too small of a number. Maybe 120 would work better. Yeah, that's probably better. But I'm not going to focus on that right now. I wanted to say, to finish this off, how do we write a media query for this crazy thing? At media all and max width. I'm just going to use the same one every time, so y'all can just be able to copy and paste it. Well, let's see. I think the UL is our Flex container. Let me just check because it's easy to forget. Yep. So I'm going to say UL Flex direction column, and then we'll probably have to write some CSS to fix that. Anyone have any idea why this is so spread out? It's confusing. So in order to save time, I'm going to tell you. It's these 2 rules right here. We told them that your flex basis is 120 pixels or 320 pixels. And then they have varying rules on whether or not they can shrink and grow. Well, what we did is we flipped everything vertically. So now that 320 is a vertical space and then the 180 or whatever is down here. So we don't want any of that, right? How do we fix that? We have to overwrite those rules. So I'm gonna say li flex, oops. I'm gonna say like 0, 0 auto, just see what it does. Yeah, it's totally different, right? We have to use the same thing for, what is it, logo or spacer? Yep. So in the media query, dot spacer, flex, I'm gonna say 0, 0 auto. Everything just collapses, right? Okay, so that's pretty good. Did we have to do 0, 0 auto? No. What is auto? Well, that means we're not setting it to anything, so it's just gonna be as high or tall or whatever as its content. We could have done something like 48 pixels, right? Okay, oh, I did that on the wrong one, sorry. Oh boy, it's going to hell. There we go, 48 pixels. We can do pixels because we're vertical, so that's fine. That spaces out a little too much. Let me do 32. Okay, and I'm also going to say text align center. Let's see if that looks okay. Cool. All right, I'm happy with that. Now again, it would look like this probably on a phone. Still got a red border. Still got some space around because I didn't add that body margin 0 rule, but that's okay. Let me hit save. So to reiterate, something as simple and straightforward as this can become a real headache when you have content that's supposed to be all kind of on the same implied horizontal line, but they are not aligned the same way. And again, that I have had very limited luck getting that, what do you call it, thing to work, aligned cell. It does not work more often than it works for me. Okay, so I think this looks good. Let me name this Elon header. Is that accurate? Yeah. And y'all can use this in your project. I mean, if you coded it with me, you can just copy and paste it and drop it right in. Totally fine with that. You can also code it again or copy and paste selectively, however you want to do it, but that should help. So now again, if we look at today at Elon page, we've covered the header, but we didn't do submit news. I want to do submit news because someone's going to be like, how do you submit news? This will not take long. I'm in the footer. Let me go to here. Okay, submit news is just another list item, but it looks different, right? LI. So I'm going to give it an ID. It's going to need submit news. I guess this is how you, well, submit news. Never thought about clicking on this button. Okay, what does submit news look like? Let's see. We have to go before our media query. So I'm going to go right here before this media query and we visit. I guess we did hashtag submit. So first of all, background, I'm going to say like tan, something like that. And then it's got a wicked border radius. Like, I don't know, it's right 32 pixels, looks like a pill. Yeah, that's not so bad. The text is totally misaligned here, right? It's like completely off. How are we going to get that text in the middle? I have an idea. If the button were set to display flex, let's see if this works. I don't know if this will work. In theory, we could say justify content center, align items center, and it goes to the middle. So in other words, we can have just like a single button use flex. That is the easiest way to center anything on the web is display flex and then justify and align to the center. We're never going to add that to like the body tag or the HTML tag, but we could totally add it to a wrapper. You'll remember on Friday, we created a wrapper or container around the whole thing at the maximum width of the page. Yeah, so I know this isn't perfect, but it's fine. I'm not gonna beat us up anymore with it. The vertical alignment of these buttons is annoying, but that's only because weekly newsletter is kicking out into 2 lines. And I don't want to we spent enough time debugging the last thing, so I'm not gonna go crazy on that. And again, if you all made this as your header and handed it in, I'm not gonna give you a hard time. What I am going to do is look at it at this resolution, and then I'm going to shrink it down to this resolution and just make sure we don't have a horizontal scroll bar or anything that's horribly misaligned. But again, you're going to see what I see, so just make sure you do that. For some reason in the past, I don't know if it's convenient forgetting, but some students have forgotten to make their project responsive. They'll do the whole project for a desktop and be like, send me the link, like, here you go. I'm like, okay, I hate to do this to you, but you have to add the media query in. So don't forget the media query. I'm definitely gonna resize it. All right, let me hit save. We have a well-deserved break coming up, I think. But since it's 10:45, if you all want, I could just spend 10 minutes talking about the project and then we can just break. And y'all can get lunch or work in here or whatever. It's totally up to you. I'm not leaving or anything. I don't need to like go shopping. I will eat lunch at some point, but I scarf my lunch in like 20 minutes. So anyways, that'll give you a lot of flexibility in case they go like either I eat or something like that. I'm just trying to think about the stuff y'all can do the first week. Yeah.
For like the project, do you want as events, like all those links, like live, like connect the links to it? No.
No, I'm glad you asked. I'm not gonna click on any links. Students often ask that, and if I don't expressly say it, half will add them and half won't. Just don't add them. It's fine. Listen, because we're not actually gonna, this is more for style than functionality, I guess, for right now. Yeah, so how do we get started on the project? Well, so first of all, we probably want to pick an article. This is the latest one, so this is what I'm picking on. And try to think about how we would lay out the portions of this that we haven't laid out yet, which basically is just like main, I guess, right? There's no aside on this page, right? So there's no content that will be to the left or right of this tube of content. But what can we say about it? Well, first of all, it's got a really clear maximum width, right? It's just cutting up and not a width. If we set the width to 960, then as soon as we go below 960, we're gonna get a big scroll bar, right? If it's a max width, everything's gonna shrink down like it does on the existing page, right? This should just get smaller. You'll notice that their pictures don't shrink like smoothly like ours do. These break down to boop, boop, boop. That's because if they're using a picture tag, it's a little bit more complicated than what we did. Basically, they have like 5 sizes of this image on there, and depending on your screen size, it picks which one it's going to load, save some time, or yeah, load time. So it has some sort of maximum width, and then it looks like the text is indented further than that maximum width. So in other words, like if I had to draw this out, I would say we have some sort of wrapper that has a max width, and then inside that we have some padding, but the padding is only on the text. It's because the images actually kind of stick out, right? Like this image it is not justified to the left or right, it's just filling the whole container. That shows us where these edges are. So that doesn't have padding, right? But as soon as we get to here, you can see that does, that does. So that's a little bit trickier. It reminds me of what we just made, which is like, where do I put these rules? How do I? Okay, don't worry about the social share. Yeah, with this one, I would do this with a figure and a figure caption. Just because it has that caption. If you did it with just an image tag, then you'd add a P tag here. Then you'd have to write all these rules for an ID for that P tag and be that small. If you just did fig caption, you can reuse those rules for this one, right? Because they're the exact same. Actually, the font size actually looks smaller on this one, but whatever. So how they do this? This is probably the trickiest thing you're going to lay out. This image is floated to the right. It does not have any padding that's indenting it from the edge of the invisible wrapper. So only the text seems to have that rule. Remember, this is something we would do by saying float right, and that allows all this text to come up. And when we did that a few days ago, y'all remember all the text that comes up alongside comes from below it, right? So like, remember it says this project furthers university, like that would have been right here. And that's what we're saying, float left, it's able to move up here. I pointed that out because if you're building this page, where do you put the code for this figure kind of depends, right? It would have to go before this paragraph in order to have this paragraph show up alongside it. In other words, a float can't pull stuff down from the top. It can only pull stuff up from the bottom. To put that another way, when you add this figure, if it doesn't line up with the text right, move the figure, move it up in your HTML so there's more paragraphs after it. And that will probably help it. And of course, raise your hand and I'll come over and be like, move the paragraph. And that should be fine. Whatever article you pick, I do want you to do the whole thing for mains. It's kind of long. This has a lot of images. You could probably find a shorter one. But keep in mind, you're gonna repeat a lot of the same rules. So once you got the basic structure down, you got the floats working, you're just gonna be copying and pasting. As a reminder, I don't care about any of this stuff at the bottom. Don't care. So one reason I thought it would be helpful if we plowed through to take a break and then I allowed everyone to kind of do their own thing is, remember, I wanted to create some instructions and clear some things up for y'all. So when you're an hour or two into the project, those questions will be answered. And I thought I could get started on that while y'all do whatever it is you're gonna do. Let's see if there are better articles. Let's see. We saw this one with the dogs. I think we've seen most of these articles. They don't publish as frequently, obviously, in the summer as they do other times. But you can go back in time if you want. That's totally fine. Like we have this new athletic director. Go post about her. I think there's a photo of her like with the president. Elon. Actually, I don't see it. Okay, that's a short one, right? So what we do here, big image, same thing with the text. You got one image there, no floats. It's a little less challenging. I'm kind of bored by this one. Maybe I should require a float. Huh? Well, okay. I'd say that's a float. I'd say if you're going to do this article that doesn't have a float, well, you're going to stick that in. What is this? I don't know. I wouldn't worry about the hover effect. It looks like just a div that's floated to the right with some background colors. So, yep, that's a little bit of a catch. Let's see. Same thing. Oh, I had her in one of my classes. Applied Media Analytics. Okay, this looks like another good one. Got a float to the right, a float to the left. Yeah, kind of long. Okay, so I think I've shown you examples enough. I'm just trying to make sure for myself there isn't like a really lame one. Like, don't do this one, right? Join us for an evening of Elon in New York City. It's like, no, that doesn't cut it. Find something with an image, okay? Preferably with a float. I'll put down one more. There we go, that's got floats. Great. All right, I'm gonna stop bothering y'all. Let me make sure all this stuff is saved correctly. So let me name this Elon footer, so you can find it. And I'm thinking if I go to my work now, it should be pretty straightforward. Again, codependent.io/bwalsh5. So here's our full page layout with the flex rule that we added today. Here's our Elon footer and here's our Elon header. I would think between those three projects, not to mention your own, I mean, you have these three projects. That should be enough to help y'all at least get started. So that doesn't mean that you won't get stuck. So again, don't hesitate to ask me questions. It's like, I know he taught us this, I just can't remember. Just ask me. This isn't a memorization class. All right, I'm gonna stop talking now. I need to go to my laptop, I'll bring it in here, and find my stuff from Bootcamp last year, and I'm just gonna duplicate that and try to update everything. Because the instructions are really similar. I just want to make sure there's nothing confusing on them. Last thing I want to say, because I left this out to start, you're going to do this in CodePen. If you have the template, great. If you don't, make sure you add these rules in there. But I would save this as like Bootcamp final project. Pretty straight on. And then just think about how am I going to lay this whole thing out. What I like to do is, is write out or draw out how I want this thing to be. So, okay, I'm going to have a container and then the nav bar. So if you pick an article, if you're visual like that and like to draw out like kind of a map for it, it's almost like an outline. You can just look at it and be like, oh yeah, now I need to do that. But not everybody works that way. It's just very easy to get kind of lost in the code if you're sitting there writing and not really seeing the results. So the way you'll hand this in is once it's named and saved and everything like that, you'll probably want to check with me and just make sure you've got everything finished. And then you'll hit the button that I don't see here. Let me hit save so I can see it. It doesn't show until you save. You'll hit share. So let's see, share, and you'll just copy the link. Y'all can just email me that link. And when I click it, it'll just pop over in my browser in CodePen, and I will see all of your code as well as the results. So that's another incredible advantage of CodePen. It's just nice and friendly, nice and nice. Anyways, copy link, and as a reminder, I am bwalsh5@elon.edu. Hit miss. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop this recording. Let's see.